Welcome. Good morning, early afternoon. This is FMA discussion. We are on episode 276, and I am so excited. We've been trying to get on Hock now for a while. There was some stuff going on, some scheduling, and he had some stuff. But hey, to no avail. We finally got him on. I'm excited. We're going to cover his journey. We're going to cover his time spent with Ernesto and Remy. And we're going to go into that force necessary, that jungle bolo. We want to hear all about that stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to be bringing them up. And stay tuned at the end, the raffle we got running for the Ukraine refugees. It's been going really well. Thus far, we've raised $900 and something. So if you want to participate, it's $10 a ticket. If you want to donate classes, books, weapons, whatever, we're taking it all. So again, this is going for a great cause. I've already sent $950 to Red Cross from the Bill McGrath. He really kickstarted our raffle. I mean, just incredible what he did for us. Yeah. But at any rate, without further ado, we're going to be bringing up Sir Hock. Hey, thank you so much for coming on. How are you?
I'm okay. I see we're on a split screen, so we're working pretty good. It worked out.
Yeah, and in fact, in my picture is clear. In the test run, for whatever reason, it was blurry, but I figured it was a glitch. But now things are coming in really clear. So yeah, we're off to a good start. So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. People were really excited to hear that you were coming on. So I think this is going to be great. We're going to go through you got such an extensive background, and I mean, between your time spent with Ernesto, Remy, you're working on the police force, the force necessary, 18 books, magazines. I mean, so much to cover, and I'm excited to do this, and I hope you are too. So is it fair to say you were working in Texas as a police officer, pre-martial arts? Is that accurate? Oop, he's frozen. Oh, okay. You're back. You froze up there for a while.
Okay, we're back. We're back.
Yeah.
So I missed that last question, whatever that was.
No. So what I was asking, that, I mean, you have an extensive background in law enforcement prior to martial arts.
During the time period, mostly, almost the whole time period of 26 years, I was working out. So they ran side to side.
Oh, okay, simultaneous. Okay, so what during your law enforcement, what made you want to seek out like training in FMA? Was it you wanted to bring stuff to help you with your job lens, or?
Well, during those days, there wasn't much available. And I really can't. Of course, I started in the early 70s. I like to say that I'm so old. I was in the patrol division when Adam 12 was on primetime television, and probably a few people remember Adam 12.
I remember.
But I was always kind of good. I was always kind of interested in the 60s, as a teenager and so forth, in 70, 71. About fighting. And I don't know why. Some people are interested in golf or tennis or whatever that was. And so I guess from television and movies and so forth, I said, I want to know how to do that, whatever it is that they're doing, And then the famous David Carradine Kung Fu show came on. And in the Wild Wild West, there was all kinds of fighting, and that was kind of raw fighting. They didn't really stage it well, if you know the history of the Robert Conrad show. So I was always interested in it, and I graduated high school and left on a motorcycle, left the New York City area, and the second summer I was in Texas and stumbled upon an Ed Parker Kempo karate school. This is like late 1972. And there were not a lot of these schools back then. And so I just walked in there, totally dumb. It was drivable for me in North Texas, and started there. And of course, soaked it all up because this is what I've always wanted to be interested in, And that was before police work. And so I got a couple of belts there and really was introduced to a lot of things, and then joined the Army. And so there were, boxing opportunities in the Army, and I wound up overseas and so forth. Came back to Texas and really, I just did karate jiu-jitsu, stand-up jiu-jitsu, Japanese style, and was always uncomfortable and unhappy with the traditional aspects and the various things that didn't fit my experience in the military police as what an investigator in the Army is what I was. And so I sort of, that back then the new things were popping all the time. Oh, did you hear about Thai boxing? And no, what is that? And so I was interested in doing all those things, and had a great piece of advice from a friend of mine, Roger White, that I should connect with these Los Angeles people. They're doing stuff you want to do, kind of non-traditional, and that's when in '86 I picked up with the Inosanto people and was doing the family activity, the Thai boxing,
JKD,
so on. And at that time was shoot wrestling before its time. They were doing a lot of that. And I always winding up looking for the next best thing, that really fit what I perceived, but what I began to realize what was needed, without any of the excessive stuff, uniforms and, system worship, system head worship. And so, that took me into the Filipino martial arts, which was a next great step from what I was doing. It was really the Inosanto people. I was an instructor with Paul Vunak and in his group. And back in the heyday, 86 through 92, when Vunak was some sort of, new horizon quality fighter. And so, boy, I jumped straight into that. That was really what I was looking for. And so ever since then, I've just been on this quest to, in terms of the Wizard of Oz, keep pulling back the curtains to see the back wall, the back guy in the back pulling all the levers and the truth of all of that stuff.
So wow. So, folks, if you're watching, yes, please tell us where you're watching from. Smash that like button. If you got questions, let me know. So you're coming from a traditional, as you mentioned, Rob, Ed Parker, Kempo, and all that. When you first got exposed to quote unquote the eclectics, FMA, JKD, and all that, what immediately resonated with you coming from like Kempo? What were some of the noticeable, tangible differences that came to mind with you and your experience?
Well, the one good thing about KENPO, and of course it's the same. It's a transitional verbal mistake, or the letter N or M. Ed Parker was a new genius on the horizon back then, and some of his books are fascinating. And it's a mix. They used to tell us, the Oriental arts came to Hawaii and then spread out for bigger people in North America. But I come to you with empty hands. That was the shocker for me, or the important aspect was it's a mixed weapons world. It's a hand, stick, knife, gun world. And when I say stick, I mean impact weapons, which could be a lamp or a chair or anything. And so that gap was missing for me, and the wide open experiences and the skill developing drills of the Inosanto world and all the things that they were doing was a big difference for me. And I saw great value in the concept of everything that I do. I say today, I wish there was at least one skill drill, which is nothing more than an exercise, and people today, they like to make fun of Filipino skill drills, or they have for the past couple of years. But you know what? It's running tires. And it's doing chin-ups. It's an exercise, and let's not make fun of skill developing drills. And I do wish that, there was at least one skill developing drill for everything that you do, you know. And if you apply yourself, you can fit one in somewhere with some idea that you know. So that was the big thing. The big change for me was just this expansive opportunity. Different things rather freely without very appealing to me. And then through time, say 90s, I was curtains wanting to find generics. What are the generics of every one of these systems? Because that's an important maturity that they have, and explore why 80% of everything always does this, and 60% of them does that, and all of them kick this out, you know. And so I became so obsessed with that, I became rather generic, you know. And it's all because of all this other stuff. And we mentioned Ed Parker. He never made any movies, but Bruce Lee did. And I don't want to sound like a cultist at all, but the words of Bruce Lee had a profound effect on me. And that is with me forever. The freedom of thought, the the personal development, these are all concepts that, you know, are very important.
I totally agree with you. That whole freedom, like, in other words, I came from Taekwondo, and I went into, I was looking MMA after it came out. And through MMA, trying to find MMA, I actually got exposed to FMA. Knowing without knowing, it was what I really wanted. But like you, it was just like this whole gamut. It was almost overwhelming for me. I'm like, oh my God, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing this. It was just like, you know, you're going in a candy store and you don't know which candy to pick out, just because it's just like, it just was so intoxicating for me, you know.
I have written an article a while back that a lot of people liked about, you know, mixed up martial arts or mixed martial arts. And I remained in a phase. I remained in a phase for, I would say 12, 15, 10, 12, maybe 15 years of being mixed up martial arts, doing all this stuff. And I wasn't on mission. I kind of had in my head what I knew what my mission was, but I wasn't on mission until I was able to organize things better and kind of break away from all that. And I'm a big one of I often say for reality fighting, you know, I have a two-pronged look. You know, have I ever seen this work or done in UFC or mixed martial arts? And secondly, should I even be considering mixed UFC or MMA? And so those are like the two catchphrases I look at. And the thing is that you know, I think the MMA, the way it's done today, which is standing through ground and pound. Let me repeat that. Ground and pound is a fantastic operation. You know, and the athletes are incredible, and they're no nonsense. You don't see them doing a bunch of junk. They're there to absolutely win. And the other fascinating thing about it is they use very little amount of material to do this. And that's always, that brings me back to my favorite line, you know, fighting is more like checkers and less like chess. And so that's why I'm a big fan of MMA. And, you know, they have rules. I understand that. But God, is going to get as close as it can be with stripped down, no nonsense goals.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct on that. I mean, I have such profound respect for those athletes and what they do. And it just seems to be going higher and higher. And as far as the skill set and what they're doing and how they're refining, you know, less is more.
Refining, reducing the abstract, You
know, it's so I'm with you on that. Just profound respect for that whole art and what they're doing. And like you said, they're bringing it to the closest humanly possible without eye gouging and groin tearing. So then, Paul, so when you went, so back to the Insano days and the Vunak days, you know, as far as the FMA, what really resonated with you? Like, you know, was there a particular weapon? Was it all of it that you really enjoyed?
Well, the one thing I really picked up from Ernesto Presas was now the brothers did the same things in the sense that all Filipino martial arts do the same things, and so but they were different than they were the same. And I was a seminar hound. I would go anywhere I possibly could. And oddly enough, I did a bunch of training in Oklahoma, which you would not think is the mecca of martial arts wonder. But yeah, a lot in Tulsa with Inosanto's guy, Terry Gibson, and all the seminars he ran with Detroit, Hartzell, Vunak was in there. Terry was great at the top. Years ago, that Dan considered him like one of his top 5 instructors. My Aikido Jitsu comes from a university, Oklahoma president, Carl Farinelli. So I was up and down to Oklahoma a lot for extensive times. I mean, a couple of days or private lessons with Terry in the middle of the week and so forth. And I started going to Remy Presas seminars. And his was different and interesting, and I love the guy, And then inside the Remy seminars were some Ernesto people who sort of called me over in one big multi-day seminar and said, "Do you ever do some of the stuff that his brother does, Ernesto?" Never heard of him. So they pulled me behind this curtain in this hotel workout area, and we started to do Ernesto stuff, and I became also an Ernesto Presas person. And I'm telling you this story because the Ernesto was obsessed with making the best system he can. And that's, single stick, double stick, espada daga, knife, and mano mano. And so he was obsessed with trying to convey and do the best he can in teaching all those things. And so it was always a struggle. And through the years, he was changing the drills up. It went from the 14 angles of attack to the 18 to the 22. Mm-hmm. And, meanwhile, at that particular point in time, I realized I can do all of this on the clock with a military combat clock. The 4 corners of the clock, 12, 3, 6, and 9 for basic training, and all the numbers on the clock for advanced training. And a student, a person will remember that instantly and forever, instead of trying to memorize various angles of attack, which are usually nonsensical. I can't, they have no sense to them. And so at this point, I began to realize, I can go to that brick wall in the back and use the combat clock, which I had first learned in the military, and get a lot of this done. And so I don't know if there was any one particular thing that captivated me about starting in the Filipino martial, and I spent a lot of time in it. And I just did it. And I was doing Aikido Jitsu and I was doing Jeet Kune Do at the same times and these various other things. But I went to the Philippines a couple of times and it became something that's a part of me. And to this day, I'm still showing how good or important it is. If I'm showing some generic thing, well, I have to drop back to a Filipino skill drill to make people better at that one particular thing. And so I don't exactly know what it was. The guys were great. Ernesto and Ray were regal originals from the Negros Island. And, when I was out on the Negros Island, I would look around at the regular people, some barely enclosed out in the jungle, with a big rusty machete on a rope on their belt. They didn't even have a belt. And you could just tell that the Presas family had a regalness about them, and they were both wonderful in their own ways,
Wow. So, I mean, Terry, when you mentioned Terry Gibson, just such an unfortunate, passed, way too early, but, his name just rings synonymous with excellence from I hear from everybody. Just incredible what he did. So I'm not surprised by Oklahoma because of him. And if I understand, like you mentioned, he was bringing all kinds of folks out for seminars and And that was a hot ticket there back in the
Yes.
day.
And I hosted him. I used to host him in North Texas too. And
Mm,
he was a lawyer, you know, and he was a football player for the state, for the college. And then he had his first dilemma with brain cancer. And then his law firm pretty much financed the school for him to be happy. You know, if this had happened today, he'd still be alive because they have all kinds of new wonderful
I
things.
know.
But I was there for the last brain surgery he had in Dallas. And they said, you know, every time his personality would change because they were going into his head and doing really deep stuff, you know. And
Terrible.
so he was very influential to me because I'd had several instructors, you know, and I first, he's dead now too, Ray Medina was Inosanto Vunak guy, and he knew this much, and but Terry Gibson knew this much, you know. and
Yeah.
it was always great to hang out with him and so on. But as the mid '90s came around, I was moving toward more of a generic thing, you know, a generic study of things. And by 1996, I retired in '97, and by '96, I was pretty much on my own, you know, and that's kind of, whereas Terry was already dead by then, you know.
Yeah.
It was pretty hard to replace him.
No, it's just, I mean, just passed on way too early. There's nothing but positive accolades when you hear his name pop up and all that. And just, yeah, Crusader, as far as who he brought, like kind of, you know, like a mini aspect of Sano, like far as bringing people out and exposing students to, you know, different teachers, systems, and trend center in his own way. So with regards to Remy and Ernesto, I know you're training with both. You know, I constantly hear the Cobaton, Ernesto, Remy, other stuff. Like, what was your experience as far as the two of them and like what you know, as far as differences or similarities?
Well, like I said, similarity wise, they did and worried about the same things that all Filipino systems worry about at their core, doing some stick versus stick and whatever. Now, Remy would not hardly ever do any knife. And that was not his public persona. He was super friendly, and he has enormous seminars, sometimes teenagers and kids in there. And and there's not going to be any, you know, gut cutting or you know, throat slashing,
blue worming,
all that stuff. And so I used to host Remy quite a bit, and he liked to pass through my city because of DFW. And so then he also liked to stay somewhere free before and after. And so he would, if I had him on a Saturday and Sunday, he would, you know, get on the phone and say, Hook, can I come Tuesday? And that would mean he didn't have to be in a hotel. He's essentially homeless. He had got so successful with so many seminars, he pretty much spun off the planet, you know. And he wasn't always that way, but he was a lot of the time with me. So he comes stay with me on Tuesday, and then, you know, Hook, can I leave late? You know, and so he would be there for a bunch of time, and not too often. He was concerned about me getting up to snuff, as they say. And so I was teaching at Gold's Gym. I had a class there for years and years. And we would go there, and I would get a friend or two to come in. Again, Roger Wyatt or Benny Parkey, just so I would have a workout partner. And he was concerned about getting me up to snuff. But he also liked staying at home, watching television, eating ice cream, relaxing, you know. Now, Ernesto, when he came and stayed with me, same thing. He's passing through Dallas. He's got to kill time between the next seminar. I, you know, had a house. I was divorced. I had a house. He with lots of bedrooms and everything. He wanted to work out every day, you know, and he was usually with someone, his son, John, who's a phenomenal athlete, by the way. And very deserving of being left in command of the Ernesto Presas regime or whatever. He liked to work out all the time, and that was his back. So if I couldn't work out that day, I was a detective then, and kind of get home late, he would be out in the backyard, pulling up weeds and building stuff, a garden or something in my house, because he was, busy. He wanted to stay busy. I'd come home, he'd be covered in dirt, working out in the backyard. And so that was a big difference. Ernesto was more obsessed with this stuff than Remy was. And in a way, it was sort of like a curse in a way, because he would change the system, and then they'd shoot a whole video series on the changes, and then he'd watch it and not like it. We're going to do it again. We do this again, and because he was seeking perfection. That's what I mean about it being almost a curse. He was trying to develop such a perfect way, Filipino and comprehensive, the big 5 major areas of play that I had mentioned earlier. And so that was his drive. And, both of them there's so many funny stories with both of them, but Ernesto would worry about the clock during seminars and training. He was, can I fit this in? Come on. He'd be looking at the clock and saying, he has to cover these 14 things, and there's 20 minutes left, And I always remember a big Dallas seminar with Remy, and it was 11 o'clock on Friday night, 3 days, or possibly 4 days, I can't remember. And it would be 11 o'clock, and he is just going on and on strong. And we're all kind of looking, geez, it's now, 11:15, it's 11:30. And then he seems to be slowing down on a particular subject. It's grinding down, and we're thinking, okay, we will be out of here soon. And then it's 11:45, and he starts a new subject. And so finally I raised my hand, Professor, it's almost midnight. Oh God, everybody go home. Because we're in the center of a hotel, or no windows outside, lose complete track of time, But the difference is, like I said, Remy was not going to show you knife stuff. Now, Remy was a brawler. He was the guy in the Philippines that got into fights with pipes. And if you read my tribute page on Facebook, we unearthed, a duel to the death, Remy and Ernesto versus 2 guys on a beach. And so Ernesto was more of an intellectual college graduate kind of guy, and then Remy was really a rough guy, won a lot of fights and won a lot of money, with a stick. But he was also, these guys were judo and karate experts too. And I could tell you so many stories, and I guess I'll just tell you this real quick one. We were at a Remy Presas seminar, rather small one in North Dallas at Steve Selby's place years ago. And my friend, everybody went out to eat lunch, but I remained there. Remy remained there. And my friend, Tom Barnhart, my favorite workout partner, remained there. And we're just sitting on the floor. So like a 22-year-old kid comes over, kind of husky, and says, "Oh, Professor, on the ground when such and such happens, what should I do?" And so Remy gets up and he gets on the floor with this kid and shows him a counter to something that is just typical ground fighting, Well, the kid, being a kid, decides to try to defeat that. I don't know why. The kid's 22, Remy is like 68 or something. And so Remy counters that. And the kid, you could just see him, he just gets kind of flustered, and he goes on, and Remy counters that. And so me and Tom are sitting there like, should we do something now? I mean, it's a 22-year-old versus a 67-year-old out here. And finally, the kid accidentally takes Remy's glasses off, and as if like, what am I doing to this guy? I've knocked his glasses off, and he stops. Remy's unflustered, and did you get it? Did you get what we're saying? And the kid felt bad, you could tell, but he just got carried away with this stuff, And and so what that left me with is, wow, and he's a black belt in judo. Remy was, and so the multitude of experience, which is always so important. shines through in these types of moments.
Wow. So did he ever, as far as Remy is concerned, did he ever give you edge weapons kind of behind the scenes, so to speak? I know he didn't do it publicly, but like
Yes.
behind the scenes?
Yes. I made him, I forced him to do a 2-day knife seminar in North Dallas one time. I just happened to see the certificate in one of my books. I said, "Oh, I remember that." And typically for me, when I teach at different martial arts schools now, the classical ones, they will often say, "I'll say, well, what do you want to do?" And they'll say, "More knife, Hock, more knife." And I assume it's knife versus knife. But in actuality, they want more knife means, unarmed versus knife. And I finally caught on to that years ago. But to me, more knife means more knife fighting instead of
when
knife
you first hear it.
And so he would do unarmed. He would do unarmed versus knife. But he did 2 days, of maybe 2 6-hour days. And it was only like 12 or 15 of us, and he would do that, but not in the big seminars. The big seminars have so many people there of all different kinds. They're all dressed up nice in uniforms. And, that was like his business model. And he was super friendly, to everyone. But I always noticed that Remy just had this Ernesto too, just like, don't push this, don't, there would be just like, a twist. I can twist off, And, one of my favorite stories is he was staying at my house and he was watching a boxing match pretty late, Remy. And I was working in the corner and the fight was over. And I said, he says, I said, did your guy win? No, the guy in the red shorts, he should have done this and that. You got some sticks here? So I said, well, I got him out in the car. This is almost midnight again. And so he wanted to work on something. So I brought the bag in, and in my small living room under the ceiling fan and the lamp and everything, he just single stick versus single stick. He wants to experiment with something and he's just going nuts, with sort of a drill. And, these were the let me invent tappy days that, is caught on with so many Remy people. And so he broke my nose that night. And it was one of a couple of times when this was broke. And so it started to bleed and I'm just trying to keep up with him. And he said, no, doors over. And so all of a sudden, I guess it was bleeding because he was just looking here and he looked up at me. Oh, you are bleeding. Yeah. And I said, I guess I am, He said, you do that to yourself? I said, no, you did that to me. But that night was pretty important. That was pretty important to me because obviously there was no fire in his eyes. But to me, his eyes, there was a fire in it. Like he just went to that next level and was working on something really hard. And it just inspired me. And so Ernesto used to say, the fire of the fight is in the stick because you can hit each other really hard and not hurt each other. And one of my first emblems was a stick with like a gas flame fire on the top of it based on that line. And so, Ernesto used to say the fire of the fight is in the stick. And in that night, I will say that with Remy at almost midnight, broke my nose. He gave me that. I got that. I can get pissed too. Yeah. And the thing about Remy was when he wanted to take you out, he could at any second. It was just about the charge in. And no matter what you put up to stop it, it didn't matter. He would go through it. And that concept and that feeling, it's not an anger or whatever. He gave that to me, that idea to me. And it was that night when he broke my nose.
Wow. Wow. You mentioned, it's funny because, by virtue of doing these interviews, I've gotten, to know more about minor niece and all that. But I keep hearing, like you mentioned, tappy tappy. Was that just made more for the public, just for seminar kind of format, or the significance of it?
Well, it could be, and it just means as it started out, just sort of trapping hands, and this is my own personal opinion, and everybody may disagree with me on that, but I started training with Remy in the late '80s, and he was a ball buster. He was a head buster. It was a dueling hard strike. He spent a lot of time developing the abanico and all the rompida, the up and down, which is a unique subject for a lot of Filipino people. To me, the Filipino martial arts is rectangular in many ways. And inside that rectangular are the X's and the figure eights. And if you take a look at all the systems, there's not a lot of up and down. But Remy capitalized on that with the rompida, the 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, the 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Yeah. And he told me once that he won many stick fights in the Philippines by hitting the weapon-bearing limb of the person. He would, the other guy would take a swing and he would catch the forearm, which is what, Sir Richard Burton, the explorer, not the actor, was ostracized in England for cheating because he would work the sword up and down and catch the limb of the other guy in various movements. And so the old days were hardcore, and he used to march around, look at people, and the harder you get sticks and training, whatever, he would just go, like this. And so then he got older. He's always wanted, in my opinion, to invent his own sombrada and invent his own huba drill. And he did with the tappy tappy. And so this is something I have to watch out for, because I'll be 70 before you know it, I can't slow down in doctrine, so he kind of spent more and more time very close up in what many of us would call hubad. Hubad in many of the islands means naked above the waist. It's actually higo hubad lubad. And so thus tappy tappy becomes a priority. Now, speaking of doctrine, you have to parse these things out. How much time are we going to spend? How important is this over this or that? And so, you have to begin to say, well, okay, I can't spend too much time this close. I have to worry about everything and not just be this close. And so, and of course, I see it as Balintawak, the tappy tappy. And and both brothers trained in Balintawak. Remy's history shows that. And when I was on a ferry in the China Sea with Ernesto Presas, and he pointed out this island, and he said, "This island over there, I learned Balintawak on this island." So everybody's done that, and it's part of a close-up trapping hands kind of stuff, trapping sticks, trapping hands. And it's vital. Like I said earlier, when you decide to finish this thing and charge in, the opponent is reflexively going to put stuff up, and you got to get through that stuff. You got to get through that stick. You got to get through the two sticks or whatever you're dealing with, and get through that stuff to hit the head and finish this thing. So it's vital material. It is. And that's become such a craze. I am a believer of the three-step rule. I'll do something 3 steps in, and I can't guarantee that on the 4th move, he's going to be where I want him to be. So I kind of trust the first move, the second move, let's get that 3rd one. But the 4th one, I think it's turning into a Jackie Chan movie, and you might not be able to get what you want to do, And so I'll dive in. And I have my own method of doing it on the combat clock. And so you do it here, you do it here, you do it here, do it here. Because like I said, I think the up and down, the 12 and the 6 o'clock area is so often ignored.
I totally agree with you. In KI, like it's rompita or a box sock, but it's, the 12, and, no argument here. It's effective. I don't know why more systems don't have it or incorporate it to the extent maybe they should. I'm not sure on that.
Well, you have these classic angles of attack drills that I've seen through the years is, let's just say they'll 12 angles. And so the 12th angle may be a strike down, not even a strike up, the strike down. So in training doctrine, you're disproportionately disrespecting the up and down by making it 1 out of 12,
True.
And so I think of stuff like that. I worry about stuff like that. So with the clock, and certainly the basic training of the clock, 12, 3, 6, and 9, you're forcing people to remember the up and down, very early.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think that's well said on your part. That it's only one strike in some of the counts, so it's probably obviously not being stressed as whereas it should be or could be. So that makes complete sense to me. So yeah, a little bit. So with your nest though, did you get mostly doubles? I mean the double stick work or a little of everything?
Oh, Ernesto wanted everything equally.
Okay.
And so you were always doing, and of course, another fascinating thing about it is that was educational for me was, the pursuit of one drill that can be done with everything. And that's one way to bring in the vast number of Filipino material, And so like everybody, I'm not a super fan of Sombrada. But I think every Filipino student needs to know Sombrada. It's too universal. You can't put a Filipino person out on the street and they not know Sombrada. It's just too universal. So you can do knife with that. You can do stick with that. You can do single stick with that. You can do empty hand. And so the concept is, okay, we got a lot of material. What drills can we use universally to cover as much as possible? And Ernesto was really good at that. And he tried to do that. And I learned a lot from that idea. Okay. So we didn't overemphasize double sticks. And we just used it as much as anything else. And to me, double sticks are a historical pursuit and a skill developing pursuit. And of course, if your sport, your hobby is to duel with double sticks or any duel really, that's fine. It's just abstract to reality, and I always like to say you're not going to be walking down the street with your 28-inch stick and coincidentally get into another fight on Avenue G with another guy with a 28-inch stick,
Right.
It's just sort of a abstract skill thing. And I just happen for all these years to know a lot of stuff about it. And if someone says, I'll be back in Royal Range in Nashville this September doing Filipino martial arts, they've asked me to do it. I'm happy to do it. I have a big smile on my face, and it is a lot of fun. And this Sunday, coming up Sunday, I'll be in West Texas, and Sunday's going to be Filipino martial arts. Everybody enjoys it, and I'm happy to cover it,
Yeah. So this is great stuff. We got some folks saying, hey, we got Sean, we got Robert Small, Patrick. Sorry, guys, I neglected to check out the comments. We got Thomas Pena, Steve Irwin, Eric O'Brien. All right. So 1996, you come up with Force Necessary. What was the inspiration and why you did it?
Well, I just really wanted to do something generic. And I used the word combatives, which was hardly used back then. I know Kelly McCann was using it, but it was also used in the concept of World War II combatives. And that was a popular thing, even though if you look at the films of World War I combatives, they look very, very much the same as World War II combatives. And so the interesting fad is they connect it once again to the faraway, the Shanghai cops who come to England. And this is and that's everything needs a story. Everything needs a story. And whether you're selling cupcakes or cars or martial arts, everything has to have a story. So that story was a bit contagious. And there was always people saying, I just want to do raw stuff. I don't want to have to be barefoot. I don't want to have to do any of these things here, extras, And so I was kind of pulling the curtains back and wanted to be totally free of all these systems that I was in and paying money to. Yeah. And so I decided to, break free to with force necessary. And then the motto is using only that force necessary to win or survive. And so, winning is situational. And for a citizen, it's getting away. For a cop, it's arresting somebody. So that's where the word survive kind of comes in. And it's a police term, using only that force necessary to win or survive. And then we are force necessary, not force unnecessary. And those systems are just chock full of extra unnecessary moves that are not swift, complete, move in. And the pursuit of that is a natural human thing. And we see it in martial arts everywhere, the pursuit of the unnecessary innocently, because people are bored with the basic 15, 20 things. Show me more, show me something else, and then it's human nature. So then then the systems have more stuff and more stuff and more stuff. And as my friends in BJJ like to say, that the smart ones will say, good God, it's checkers, you invent the Putuka Plakla, and then you invent the counter to the Putuka Plakla, and then you forgot about how to do some super basic things, You forget the shrimp, but you can do the counter to the Putuka Plakla.
Yeah, but you forgot to do
this is not human nature. Yeah. And so a guy picked me up for a seminar one time at the airport. He says to me, okay, Hock, this time I want you to show the most complicated things you possible. I want you to blow my mind with complication. And I just sat there in the car and said, that ain't me. I'm the exact opposite of that. I'm trying to make things simple, and that's the wrong direction for me. And so these things, this is what I was interested in doing. Getting completely free, the difference between dogma and doctrine, getting completely free from all these people and trying to develop this mission thing. And the most helpful guy in this regard was Remy Presas. He was excited for me. Other people, they just looked at me and said, does this mean you're going to stop sending me money? Yeah, that's one thing. Yeah. But Remy Presas was trying to help me. He was trying to help me invent names. What will you call yourself? And he was helping me make names up and stuff like this. And so he was the most helpful, which of course helps me learn about the system. Important martial arts people are king makers. They are people that need to make other people successful and smarter. That's what a proper martial art leader does. And of course, this guy mentioned Ray Medina, years and years ago in the 80s, an Inosanto guy, really made me better than him. He hung in there with me and was able to develop me so much that I could go toe to toe him in boxing and switch leads. I could do all this stuff. He taught me all that, but I don't necessarily know that was his mission, but it became my mission. And so rather than, if you're in a traditional martial arts system, you're, as Bruce Lee would say, you're always usually suppressed in some way. And Bruce Lee said, they're all traps. A martial arts system is its own trap. And if you don't have one like that, and the head guy has the mission of improving you as much as you can and being a king maker, instead of a stumpifier, that's an important lesson in life and humanity too, And so that was another reason why I decided to do the force necessary angle. And then I keep the ever in a quest to find the brick wall behind the curtains, I make the Pacific Archipelago Concepts Group. We mentioned the word combatives earlier. I'm very tired of it. I'm very tired of it. Now, if you do Tai Chi and you do an eye jab, all of a sudden it's Tai Chi combative. Crazy combatives. It's great. Just add the word combatives to it, And so, hey, I want everybody, and I tell my guys this too, to do whatever makes you successful. Use whatever name you think in your neighborhood or in your world that works. You continue to do it. But for me, I'm trying to shy away from the word combatives. Yeah. Even though I was, in the 90s using it when hardly anybody else was, because I'm tired of it. And I'm not a combative person on top of that, And so I've switched over to Dan's Inosano's favorite words of concepts. So it's Pacific Archipelago Concepts. And where possible, I try to use the word concepts because I'm not a tough guy. I'm not a bad guy and all that stuff. I try to do the right thing. And it's a mistake. It's a business mistake. It's not a search term, like combatives are. But I'm trying to just slowly trying to get away from all that tough guy lingo,
Yeah. I think you're right in so many points that you just mentioned. Like, for instance, people want more and more instead of taking what they had and refining it, make it quicker, better, more efficient, economy of motion, and so forth like that. They're just, I want more, and before you know it, they become completely dysfunctional because they don't know what works or what doesn't work because they've been accumulating, and so in regards to this, it seems like you take the force necessary, if I'm not mistaken, and you tailor it to law enforcement and civilian. Is that fair?
Well, civilian, I will generically, I will tailor it to anybody. It's the fundamentals, it's the basic takedowns, the basic survival ground fighting, the basic everything, and so it's geared for everybody. So, I have the force necessary hand versus hand versus stick, hand versus knife, hand versus gun threats, force necessary stick versus unarmed, stick versus stick. It can happen. Crowbar versus, tire, iron, stuff like that. Stick versus knife and stick versus gun threats, as in, impacting the arm that's pulling the gun out. Knife is knife versus unarmed, a highly popular event that could happen. And we're talking about the law and legal issues about this. Knife versus stick, knife versus knife versus gun threats. And force necessary gun, which is my end of it, is strictly simulated ammo situations. I do not teach marksmanship. It bores me to tears. I've been shooting since 1969, and I just don't want to teach people how to shoot. So I usually pair up with experts, and everyone's been wonderful teachers that I've paired up with. They do 3-4 hours live fire. Then I come in with, simulated ammo stuff and fighting with a gun in your hand. Support the gun is their support to support the knife, support the gun. And so that's the top 4. Then I have the Pacific Archipelago Concepts and FMA, but of course it fits the islands of the Pacific. Everything I've done since 1972, Indonesia, the Philippines, Hawaii, Japan. And then finally, I do teach the police once in a while. I taught the counterterrorism unit in Brussels, Belgium, and special operations in Italy, and so on. Not all the time. I don't want to confuse people to think I'm out there teaching the military all the time. It just happens once in a while. Same thing with the police. And then I have the Defender, police judo course. And when I started in police work, everything was pretty much judo. They called it police judo. They didn't use the word defensive tactics. And so it was very popular, and it was great. It was problem solving. It was pretty like kind of a karate and a judo, and you problem solve real situations. And I thought it was so practical. I always thought this is the best training, and this is probably why I moved toward the force necessary. Is this mentality? Okay, here's a problem. Let's solve this problem. And so I always said, if I ever could, I would keep the term police judo because of its, importance. And, now it's become a variety of things. And now I could spend an hour talking about police training. It's pros and mostly it's and mostly cons, and so that's kind of what Force Necessary is. It's those four categories, and then I do the PAC course, Pacific Archipelago Concepts, and then once in a while, and the police judo course is hand, stick, knife, gun with lots of cop stuff before, during, and after.
Because I got a question in from Dragan, and his question is, here we go. What is a good way for a person coming from the sport combat of traditional martial background to figure out, run diagnostic tests of what their shortcomings are and how to improve them if aiming to develop a practical street-oriented fight game?
And so, in other words, how do you evaluate your traditional martial art to see if it's suitable? Is that kind of
that's how
the crux of that?
Yeah, that's how I'm reading it.
Yeah, I think that that is how does a tennis coach look at a tennis player and fix his tennis? How does a how does a mediocre football coach compared to an old hand wise one? And so you have to have this filter, that is able to look at something. I feel like now, this is my 50th year in the martial arts. 50. Somebody brought that to my attention. It's kind of shocking. And I have this filter in my head that I look at something and I say, that's not worth much. Or they're selling you that for $1, but it's actually worth 40 cents. There goes somebody's playing the Italian commercial here. You hear that music? Oh, that's gone now. Okay. So anyway, so the problem, I would say, solution to that problem is you got to find somebody that you can trust that'll train you and tell you that. Because if you're just, I told you I spent like 12 years in mixed up martial arts. I had no filter on this. I just wanted to do everything. You have to, and after a while, and of course, I've arrested in 26 years, probably about 900 people. Could be 880, could be 910, I don't know. All of them are cranky. Some of them try to escape. The next area, resist and fight you. And I've had, and then this is statistic too. And then a few of them try to kill you, And so having gone through that, and I've been fortunate or unfortunate enough to investigate hundreds of assault cases. And now many of them are filmed. And so you just have this idea after a while, and some young people are capable of doing it too, that should I bother with that or should I not, And that's how I could best answer that is you got to find somebody that's been around the block, I think, that can say, let me just give you one quick example right now. I was in Thai boxing for a long time with Master Chai and the Asano people, or boxing and the clinch, the official clinch, the standard clinch. I don't hardly ever see anyone clinch anybody like that in real life. They don't do that. And if perhaps they did, about 47 uppercuts to their torso right away is a terrific counter to a street, simple checkers counter to it. And so if you're in the arts, you take the clinch. It's in boxing sport. It's in Thai boxing. Let's spend 17 days on the clinch. And you do all kinds of tricks on the clinch. You get out of the clinch and all that kind of stuff. And then if you look around at the real world, really nobody's clinching anybody in that sport manner to speak of. And so how much priority should you put on working on that subject if you're seeking reality material? Obviously, you're going to be a boxer, you're going to be a Thai boxer, you have to worry about that. And so this is a filter that you get through time to say, well, you know, my favorite motto of all time, and beginning a seminar, is the who, what, where, when, how, and why questions, the W's and the H. And you should always remain skeptical. And one of the whys is, why am I doing this? You know, why is this particular thing so important? You know? And this is just an example of a filtration system of who you are, who do you think you're going to be fighting? And is it going to be a Nazi commando or a drunk guy in a bar, which is overtrained way too much because, you know, domestic violence is out of control. But you know, who are you? What do you think is really going to happen? And I have another article that I write that I put up frequently is, what is the perception of your first and next fight? And is it David Carradine versus Chuck Norris? Is that what you think the fight's going to look like? Or something, you know, from television that is not going to be real at all, you know? And so and then next step is, what is the perception of your instructor's perception of your first or next fight? And do you train for that? And then that suddenly, you know, doesn't happen at all. So finding a really good instructor would be the best way for a person to evaluate, you know, what they were doing in a traditional system and what works. Remember, it's all good. It gets you off the couch, and you're exercising.
True.
And even if it's an abstract benefit, it's better than no benefit. And if you're they talk about food deserts. If you're in a martial arts desert, you have to go to what's there. And just try to keep the skeptical brain working, the skeptical head. And these people, they do martial arts for a host of things. I did for a period of time. I liked the guys and the gals, and it's a social deal. And we had the Christmas party. And, you know, there's many reasons why you get attached to your local system, you know, and just try to stay skeptical.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, as long as, like you said, if they're doing something, there's a benefit. You know, if they're not sitting eating TV dinners and watching movies, I mean, that's, you know, I mean, that's right there, you know.
And and of course, in the end, I you know, I always like to say, I want you to be happy. And if you're happy doing something, I'm happy doing something. I'm happy for you. Just know where it fits. You know, and the who, what, where, when, how, and why. That's all I ask. Is just know, you know, where it fits.
Right, and what you're doing or what you're seeking. Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like this was, when you first created it, 96, it was well received. I mean, you were getting seminars, and I mean, were there any kind of difficulties when you first came out with it?
Well, it was a slow development. And so basically, I can tell you very shortly, you know, and it's interesting for martial art business to learn this. And so I got back after doing Ernesto material for about 5 years, doing Inosanto material 5 or 6 years, doing Remy material for all those years. One of my friends said, I'm going to the Philippines. We're going to see Ernesto for about a month. Total for travel. It was about 3 weeks or something. And he says, you got to come with me. So I did. I sold my car, and I had all kinds of comp time from being a detective, you know, so I was gone, and they were glad for me to burn it up because it becomes a problem for them. So I go over there, and we do 3 weeks, Sundays off, like 3-4 hours in the morning, 2-hour lunch, 3-4 hours in the afternoon. Very hot. It's very hot there, right? And so at the end of this period, to our surprise, you know, Ernesto was famous for examination time. And so you'd learn something for 3 hours, and he would test you on that. You know, and he would attack. You know, it was part of the test. But the first time, there was only like 6 to 8 of us, and we had Ernesto black belts working directly with us every day. Now there's.
Oh, hold on, folks. The internet blew him out. Hopefully he's coming back. He should be coming back. That'll be an internet glitch on his end. Good old technology. Let me just send him a quick message just so he knows to come back in. Ooh. There we go. Ah, you're back. There we go. See, persistence stays
I have
on.
the picture for some reason. Oh, there we go. It just bombed, man.
No, yeah, the internet. Believe me, it's not the first time it happens. It's kind of par for the course. You know what I mean? You have to, but anyway, you're back. So hey, so we were on kind of
So where we left off?
Yeah.
We were talking about the difficulty of getting seminars, which is a good business question to bring up for people who want to do them, which is a very, as Remy Presas told me years ago, he said, seminars, very tricky business. And he had a lot of advice for me. You pick up by osmosis from hanging around with these guys and what they do. But anyway, so I left off with the fact that the final day was kind of a test. You were tested every 4 hours, but the final day was a test. And so those of us there, which is a few of us, became black belts in our first degree black belts in Ernesto system. And you could use the word guru, you know. And so I get back from that trip, and you have to understand, in the early 90s, the environment was kind of different in Filipino martial arts. Everybody wanted to have a backyard workout, a garage, workout, or even a school, or add it to their school. And there really wasn't much of a way to get an instructorship. And for example, the Inosano world, it was a tremendous uphill deal. I was level 5 of the 10 levels, to try to get to that path through Terry Gibson. And so suddenly then I had picked up a piece of paper, and I said, if you do these 12 things, you'll get the first belt in, back then it was Arnis de Mano with Ernesto Presas. And I said, from Manila, do these 12 things. And they said, what? A list? An actual list? And then I said, if you pick up the next one, if you do these 13 things. So basically I said, if you can do these 26 things, you could be a basic instructor with Ernesto Presas. And so they just fell out of their chairs because it was something visible and achievable right away, and not, as the famous word, nebulous is, And so suddenly I became famous in America. And I started doing the seminars. People would have me in all over the country. And then in England, and I was doing this material, and I was also paving the way for the Presas brothers at the same time. And so this is really in 92, 93, 94, how I started to travel. And meanwhile, so if the seminar was 14 hours, I would wind up doing like 3 hours in my own personal experimentation with a knife, a stick, or empty hand. And so these people were getting slowly introduced to a generic me, that was different than the other thing. And so then they say, hey, next time you come back, do some of those takedowns again. And for example, it's fun to take a look at a generic takedown. Can I do it while I'm holding a stick? Can I do it while I'm holding 2 sticks? Can I do it while I'm holding a knife? A universal famous takedown, And so this is things, by the way, that the Presas brothers, especially Ernesto, but if I can do it with this, can I do it with this? Can I do it with this? This is a concept that they taught me, So next thing I know, by 95 or 96, I'm doing more than half of my seminars with my comprised generic information. And so that's how by 96 or 97, people were quite accustomed to and seeking, this a generic way to fight. I'll say that I lost some business. There were places in Germany that I was going just to do Filipino martial arts, and I wasn't doing that much. And so all of a sudden, I'm not going to that group in Frankfurt anymore. But I was going to other places.
Right, you're going another door open.
Yeah, if they would have just asked me, I'd be happy to do all that material. But they just didn't like it that I was not. And so that's how forced necessary courses and so on continue to perpetuate. And that's how that happened.
No, that's awesome though. Like you said, some people didn't bring you back, but others people brought you. So it still continued to grow and manifest. Everybody has their growing pains, right? So, and you're still, and it sounds like to this very present day, you're still doing seminars on all that material, correct?
Yeah, that is. And of course, COVID has kicked everybody's rear end. There are places I go to in Canada, the schools are closed forever. My biggest fear, is going to Europe and being stuck there. Somebody sneezes and they lock the country down. And Australia is untouchable. Yeah, Australia is untouchable right now. To me, it is similar to a science fiction movie in the past. They seem to be improving slightly, but just like your worst configuration of a government, and I just love Australia, and I always thought they were really tough people, but COVID has imprisoned them. Yeah. New Zealand was the same way. We have guys in New Zealand. And so I generally have gone, and will next year, I presume, go to about 11 countries a year. And that includes the U.S. Yeah, and so I go to Hungary, I go to Belgium, I go to England, Germany. But the schools have closed in Germany. There's just one or two that I could go to. They're still open. That somehow hung on. And from a business perspective, most of the people in America too that have schools still open have day jobs, really good day jobs. While their attendance dropped 40, 50, 60%, doesn't matter to them that much because they have day jobs,
Yeah.
And so few people have hung on, and I'm still going to those places. So, it's a haul to go to Australia. That flight is incredible. But once I'm there, I'm very happy. And the other thing is, they're terrific people. They're all terrific people. I love to see them. They've become friends, and so I have to keep going. I have to keep going.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but it's an incredible place to go. But much to your point, COVID. I read a statistic, a sad one to say the least, about 30-something% of schools in our country, like done, closed down, shut down, wiped out.
Yeah.
That's sad. Talk about.
And so these are. I have a newsletter that goes out every month. Got about 15,000 people around the world on it, and I started looking at the reject emails, and now there's like 70, but there used to be 150 a news blast and 120. So I said, well, that's a lot. I'm going to take a look at these, and they're closed schools. The email's dead. They're done. And then if I have time, I'll type in there, and you see the web page that they're closed. So it's a shame.
I know. Just people's savings, the effort they put into it, and just to get wiped out by a virus. It's just like who would have guessed or thought,
Yeah, a virus.
Yeah.
It was pretty bad, but it's not Ebola. It is not Ebola.
No, I think
this is a good test for.
And I think we're heading out.
It's a good test for a real future problem,
Yeah, and I think we're starting to leave. I think we're at the tail end of it. I really do. I think by summer, midsummer, I think hopefully it's going to be a thing of the past. I hope, but we're seeing to be exiting.
Yeah.
I hope.
You bet.
So you got 18 books. Wow. So what what was the incentive or inspiration for you just to go on a writing frenzy?
Well, I've always been writing, and basically my first book was a detective novel published in '85,
Okay.
and it was a tough industry. It's very tough, but I've always written, and I'm in a plane, I'm in a hotel, I have lots of time to write, and I started, of course, I have what I consider to be, and what others consider to be, the best knife book ever, the Knife Combatives book. 1,400 over 1,400 how-to photographs and ground to standing and all this kind of stuff. and then of course I put together a stick combatives book. If you take stick versus stick out of the Filipino martial arts, there's not a lot of stick work. And so that's what I propose to do with Force Necessary Stick. And so you have to do some stick versus stick, but if I've been on calls where people have fought with tire irons versus crowbars, and drunks at a softball tournament, baseball bat versus baseball bat, and there's got to be some of that information in there. So I have a couple of nonfiction books, and I also have a police memoirs book about what life is like in the military police and Texas police and stuff like that. So I've never stopped writing. In about 2005, I picked up with fiction again. I came to as I said, the story of everything is more important. I think more people know more about the Civil War from the movie Gone with the Wind than any history class they've been in. And so a story is a powerful thing. Because there's emotions attached to it. If it's a good story, you remember it more. And so I started writing these Western adventures, and picked up by Wolfpack Publishing in Las Vegas. And so they've got my crime novels, and they've got the Western books. And then the martial art books go through Germany. There's a publisher in Germany that does those.
Fantastic. And then, of course, the magazines are on Black Belt, the face of the cover of Black Belt magazine. So obviously many articles have been written.
Yeah, that was that's the heyday of that world. Yeah. When Black Belt magazine, Inside Kung Fu, Inside Karate, that was the 90s, the 80s and the 90s. And I had a magazine called Close Quarter Combat Magazine for 3, 4, 5 years in the 90s, early 2000s, thereabouts. And we became so successful that the bookstore distributors wanted us to appear on the new magazine stands. And so that was a nightmare. Every issue, the expense of every issue is like buying a really good used new car. And so when they want you to go into the bookstores, it's like buying 2 used cars every month. And the payment system is horrible. You get $7 from store 47, $28 from store 63. And it's an absolute nightmare. And that's why magazines make their money from advertising. Some of them don't even want the royalty from the magazine. And so I threw in the towel after you think, wow, I'm successful, I'm in all these bookstores, our magazine is in, and then it's absolute nightmare. Life is so much easier without that magazine.
Wow, that's funny you mentioned, because I would have never guessed that had I not brought that up. That's interesting. Hey, I got a question here for you. So Patrick's asking, does he remember one of his representatives from California, John McCurry?
Yes.
Okay.
Disappeared. Okay. I don't know what happened to him. He was a big host of mine in Southern California in Los Angeles, and he was always been fascinated by Sea-Lot, and he took this big jump into Sea-Lot, and became obsessed with it. And then all of his old friends, I still hear from some of them, have no idea where he is. He and his wife may have retired and moved to Las Vegas. He was a lot older than us back then too, you know.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, yes, I remember him, but I think he just moved away.
He could be in some village in Indonesia. I mean, who knows? You know?
Yeah, that could be. But knowing him, he's just, if he's still alive, we don't know. He's kicked back in Las Vegas somewhere, I imagine.
So what's the future hold for you? So what are your future goals for yourself and the system now that we're kind of segueing, hopefully, out of COVID?
Well, I always said that when I'm 72, I'm only doing one seminar a month, other than Europe, or, you know, because if you go to another country like Australia, you got to do a string of them. But COVID has forced me into an early retirement where I'm trying to do one seminar a month, you know. Yeah. I have a lot to do. The publisher wants me to do all my Westerns in audio. So I have like 6 audio books I have to make and narrate, you know. And so this is keeping me pretty busy here in America, which is a good thing. And I you know, kind of 72 or so, I may do a seminar a month. And then of course I plan on writing at least one book a year, and then one martial arts, so to speak, book a year. You know, I have the training mission books, which are hand, stick, knife, gun. It's too long to explain now. I have a Stop 6 program, and I want to progress the training missions through the Stop 6. And then, so that I'm working on training mission 3 now. And I have like 3 novels I'm working on. Okay. And so writing is a big thing for my future. And I will be popping in and out of seminars until I just can't do it anymore.
I don't know. Those sounds like great goals. I mean, writing a book, you know, still maybe keeping the seminars. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. Got a comment from Patrick here. Again, he helped me a lot with my Filipino martial arts journey. Laid down my foundation because of him. I had the pleasure to meet Remy Presas Jr. and Tuan Ray Dianalo. All right. So what if, okay, closing statement. What advice would you like to give to the FMA community?
Well, I would say just keep on having fun. You know, it's just in the who, what, where, when, how, and why. Know what you're doing and why you do it, and just keep on having some fun and working out. The exercise is great. The skill development is great, and everybody. There for a while, I thought it was going to go away largely, and that was when a group of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people ridiculed it. And so the real macho guys are doing BJJ, you know, and so there was definitely a downturn. And then that message seemed to die off years later. And I noticed that the macho guys, you know, 25 to 30, you know, with the tattoos, were doing Filipino martial arts. And so there was like a resurgence of it.
Yeah.
And so that was good to hear and see, and so I think, you know, a lot of people are telling me it's coming back, and the more people that are doing it, it's great fun, it's great exercise, and very addictive, you know, to do. So I'm always amazed at the addiction of people and sticks. I just watch them. I say, wow, people just really love this, and so. It's just you got to get out, got to do it, have some fun, develop skill, you know, and when Remy Presas died, before his death, his major concern was, damn, I didn't get in Africa enough. I didn't spread modern arnis in Africa enough. That was his big, you know, darn it. I didn't get to Africa enough. And so just keep working out, spreading the word, you know, and just have some fun. Be happy.
That sounds like great advice to me. And don't take it too serious. Really, at the end of the day, you have to enjoy it and put a smile on your face. If it's anything but that, why are you doing it? You know what I mean? If it's, if it's
Yeah.
I don't know. That sounds like great advice. I mean, but I really appreciate you coming on. This has been most enjoyable. So what I do is I download it and then I throw it on YouTube. And of course, I'll send you the link via Messenger so you can share it about where you'd
Yeah.
like. And
I will. And, cut that down part out if you can. Where
oh
we
yeah,
lost each other.
yeah. No,
Can you
I
cut
will.
that
I'm going
out?
to edit. I'll be able to edit that section out. Yeah, yeah. No worries there.
Okay, good. That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Yeah, I know. So we don't. Hey, where'd he go? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, I really appreciate it, and I hope you're well and enjoy your days. Enjoy, and I look forward to your books and whatever you got coming down the pipeline.
All righty. I got to go write my Westerns now, so I have to go. All right. We'll see you. You hang in there.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So it concludes 276. It was fun. It was enjoyable. So if you didn't catch during our slight interruption with him, next is Nick Merchant. So we're trying to cover more Kabbalah Sarah. I kind of feel bad. I just one of those areas. We just haven't been able to get people on, to be quite honest with you. But he's coming on Saturday, 2 p.m., doing a demo too. So Nick will be showing stuff within Kabbalah Sarah. And Sunday, Spencer G. Matt Marnis. He'll be showing stuff from that system. So kind of two not widely covered systems. Definitely from Spencer G. We haven't covered that at all yet. Somebody touched upon it, in an episode, but no, and also Spencer's going to be doing videos too. And lastly, raffle. Gaining money, donating to the Ukrainian refugees, Red Cross actually, and thus far we've been able to send $950 to them. Tuan Bill really gave us a jump start in that. He took 90% off his online videos and just helped us immensely. But the main raffle is still going to May 15th, 6 p.m. when we'll actually raffle off the items. And those listed items are an FMA discussion. Go on the pin post, and you'll see thus far what's donated. I have some more stuff to put on there. I just got somebody donated some training wooden stuff. So very ornate, and that's coming. So I'll be posting that